He had to read from a cue card the entire time. He had stuff in front of him the entire time. It was sitting there in his lap. The entire time. I mean, this is a stunt. It's a stunt for Zelensky to be with the U.S. president, and it's a stunt to make Joe Biden look like he's tough and like he's doing something. What gets me, though, even more, is that he can go over there. He can travel 5,000 miles and visit Kyiv. He can go over there, but he can't ever actually make it to the border to see everything that's happening with our border. He can go and talk about Poland's or Ukraine's border, but he can't talk about the border here in the United States. Now, he left. It was all very surreptitious. He left at 4 a.m. Sunday, and he flew to Poland and then apparently took a 10-hour train ride so they could do this, so they could have this, whatever this is, I guess. And it's 4 days before the 1-year anniversary of Russia's invasion. Now, he hasn't visited East Palestine either. That's kind of in his backyard, isn't it? East Palestine, Ohio's in his backyard. Toxic train derailment, considered an ecological disaster. But he can go and do this. I think he's concerned about their borders, but he's not concerned about our borders. And this is why a lot of people think, it's a stunt. What he's doing is a stunt. Look at it this way. He's being besieged by a lot of people on the left and some neocons who desperately want everything to be a big conflict. And he stopped short of full on, support. We're gonna give you some equipment and give you some cash, and we're gonna stop there. Obviously, Zelensky wants more, so he's gonna go over there and pose with Zelensky for what? Doesn't make any sense. It's not as though he's increasing the engagement of the United States. He wants the photo op. Zelensky will welcome the photo op. Now, that's not to say, and by the way, these two things can be true. I always get ticked off whenever I talk about the situation with Ukraine and Russia because it's not one or the other. You can say simultaneously both of these things can coexist. That Russia had no business invading Ukraine. And also, Ukraine isn't an angel. You can say their government is not an angel. You can believe both of these things. They can both coexist simultaneously in the same sphere of reality. And you can also believe that the president it may have been a better optic. It would have been nice if he would have visited East Palestine. He's got the time. Hell, he's been calling lids at 4 o'clock. Can you imagine? I wonder what that's like to be done with work like that. Calls lids at 4 o'clock. Some days, hell, he calls lids at 12 o'clock. He has the time, clearly. So he couldn't make the trip to his backyard in East Palestine, but he can ride for 10 hours, fly 5,000 miles, then take a 10-hour plane ride or a rail car, travel by train, 10-hour train ride, so that he can stand in Ukraine? Just unbelievable. Now, apparently, the White House was very, very, understandably quiet about how he was traveling and where he was traveling to. And they said that they notified the Russians that Biden was going to be traveling to Kyiv. They did some hours before his departure for the purpose of deconfliction. Now, I do understand that if he's going to visit, you don't want the Russians to find out all of a sudden in the press and be like, oh my gosh, he's standing there. Oh, because that could absolutely, and especially by people as paranoid as they are, that could absolutely be interpreted as some sort of move towards increased aggression. You have to remember, the Russian government believes if you look at them the wrong way, you're trying to fight them. If you sneeze in their general direction, you just challenge them to a fight. That's how they look at it. Whether they win it or not is a completely different, that's a whole other thing. They just always are on the cusp of conflict because they believe everyone is trying to fight them. When in reality, historically, it's not really that way. That's not really what history shows. But I digress. That's the reason why they gave them the heads up, so that they didn't freak out and think that this was going to be, because look, I saw some people saying, well, we shouldn't have even notified him. No, because here's the point. The point of being a leader isn't to act like the ultimate badass, right? If you want to do that, then go try being Rambo. The goal of a leader is to maintain peace and prosperity and try not to get all your people killed in a war. That is the point of being a leader. So people who think that it's supposed to be some measure of badassery, I think have a really completely different understanding than the idea behind the creation of what the leader of the free world's supposed to be like. Now, that's not to say you don't take a tough stance on certain issues. That's not to say that sometimes you aren't put in positions where you have to make divisive moves. I mean, that's not to the exclusion of all of those possibilities. And, heaven knows that Biden's completely not up to that task. But it makes sense that he gave them a heads up. And hours before is just fine, so that they still feel like they're still on the periphery of being in the know, and that we weren't taking them by surprise. But I am curious as to how it was presented to them. Like, he's just going to go stand with Zelensky and no big deal. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious about all of this. It's a very interesting, I am the only person in my house that holds the position that I do on Ukraine and Russia. I am the odd man out of my house on this. And I somewhat jokingly, call everybody else a neocon. But I am very singular in my home. I just don't share the viewpoint that we have a major obligation. And I think that they've been doing fine on their own. And that's the other thing. I don't mind helping with equipment or something else if it means I don't have to help with boots on the ground later. However, this is the big thing that everyone ignores whenever discussing this. And they always try to paint conservatives or people who ask questions about it as somehow being against a sovereign entity fighting for their freedom. Can we have some accountability? I love how the deflection is, well, you can't know where your money goes. And if you want to know where your money goes, that must mean you love Russia. It's so stupid. We just want some accountability as to where in the hell our money's going. And maybe why so much of it is going over there. I mean, good grief, we're at a point where the deficit is ballooning, and the administration's response isn't to give less money to foreign nations, but it's to tax the people of the United States more as a way to offset it, because heaven knows they're not going to cut spending. So yeah, I think we're owed some explanations here.